Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the May 29th Cincinnati School Board meeting to order. Treasurer Wagner, would you please call attendance roll?
Mr. Craig,
Here.
Mr. Lindy,
Here.
Ms. Mapp. Here. Dr. Moffitt.
Here.
Mr. Morosky. Vice President Weinberg.
Here.
President Bolton.
Present. Vice President Weinberg, would you please explain how folks can virtually participate?
Yes, absolutely. So for the members of public who are online and they wish to speak during hearing of the public this evening, you may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your request for 5 minutes. If you would like a direct response, to your questions, please make sure to share your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and of course, your contact information.
Thank you. The chair will now entertain a motion and a second to approve the May 29th business meeting agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Treasurer Wagner, will you call a voting roll?
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp.
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt, Mr. Morosky. Vice President Weinberg.
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. This evening's agenda is approved as posted, and we'll go ahead with old business first, and that will provide us some updates on behalf from the board. I don't think we have any from the board. The interim superintendent Murphy and Treasurer Wagner as follows. Do you have an update on the gap closing?
We do. I do. We work together. So Rob, would you mind? Thank you. So, you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. So, just want to cover the activities that happened since the last time we reported, publicly on May 20th and what we've accomplished and where we are as of today. So we, did verify all the reductions that were not in the budget software. So they were taken out. All the school budgets have been submitted. We did develop the budget task force, and I'd like to thank all the union leads for participating. They spent 2 days with us. And I'll go over some of those activities in just a minute. And a small group of us went through all the central office budgets line by line, and were able to find some reductions. So these are the participants in the budget task force, representative from CFT, CFOP, CAS, AFSCME, the trades and local 20, and then some of the administration. We started out with the 3 of us and then added more as we needed advice and data. And so, like I said, we spent 2 days together. Next slide. Not 2 full days, but 2 meetings. So we broke up in the first day. We went through and I identified all the areas that we needed to go back and review that were opportunities for budget reductions. There was a small group that went through and volunteered to look at all the contracts. There was a group that went to look for high school staffing changes, and there's a team that is still currently working. They had to break it up into 2 days. I think the next meeting is tomorrow, so we should get some results from the elementary team by the end of tomorrow. Then there was a team that looked at all the recommendations that are on the budget recommendation reductions review that came to us from the board. There's a group that's looking at reorganization and streamlining into and maybe consolidating positions. And there also a group that looked at the assistant principal formula, because that was an area that is not dictated by collective bargaining agreement or state law. So it's district practice. There's that opportunity to change. And we were asked to revisit the assistant principal's culture. Since originally that was supposed to be funded through ESSER for 1 year. Is now sitting in Title I, and but looked at that as an opportunity as well. And then looking at all existing vacancies to see if they're required to be fulfilled for compliance. So small groups went away, did some work. We came back together on the 23rd and gave each other updates. We still have to complete the elementary review and go back and look over the current central office vacancies for that determination. So on the 20th, this is this slide that I shared with you. We started with the extract on Monday, the 20th at 655.3 million. Our revised budget target was 623 because of the triennial updates on property tax collections. And then, so we started with a gap to close of 31.6 million, but we're using 5.6 million of the underspend in prior years for the preschool expansion to cover the increase in costs in the preschool expansion. So that nets our gap at 26 million. So there was one recommendation that the board approved to reduce the custodians by 30 positions. At the recommendation of the superintendent and in collaboration with ASME, they changed that to a reduction of 15. And so that gained us $800,000 in savings. We had administrative positions, reductions of 16 that are funded by the general fund for 2.8 million. We went back and reviewed all the reductions. Oh, this is from the line item that we went through budget by budget. We found another $1 million to cut. Bramble was approved for 6 preschool classrooms, but they're only filling 5 of them. So we didn't need the extra preschool classroom. And that was a teacher, a para, a nap aide. And then we decided to delay the half-time principal for another year. The budget task force group that looked at the high schools found 13 teachers that were not needed for the year due to enrollment changes. So that saved us 1.4 million. The budget task force that looked at the APs of elementary, we reduced 9, or some of those will be repurposed in other positions. But that was another 1.2 million. We're still waiting for the elementary team. That's still in progress. The very next day after I presented to the budget, to the board, the transportation budget went up by $6.7 million. So that's why it's highlighted kind of in pink as to draw. That's not a reduction, but an add. So we're having to look through that to understand why it was so large. The contract review team found just one additional vendor contract. Remember, the previous superintendent had gone through 2 or 3 different reviews. So there was just one more that they found that they didn't need anymore. And then the budget task force that looked at the board recs and suggestions didn't find any to make any more reductions. They thought we've done as far as we could go. So with that addition of transportation, we have a net reduction of $1 million. Next slide. At the same time that work was being done, the assistant treasurer and his grants team went and looked at other funds to see if there was anything that was in the general fund that could be shifted. And so they determined, because we were closing in our year end, that we were going to end the year with about 5 million out of ESSER that's unspent. We have until September 30th to spend that. And so we're recommending that we take 5 million of IT equipment payment in July and use ESSER to do that. We also found that in Fund 11, which is where all our tuition payments go, that fund balance has grown over the last few years, and we could use $1 million to help offset preschool teacher salaries. Fund 14 is where we manage our copier contracts through ProSource. That also has a balance that's been growing. And so we thought we could reduce $500,000 worth of copy click expenses in the general fund. And then Title IV has enough money in it to cover the world languages curriculum. There's also this phenomena in the Department of Student Services where when an IEP, individual education plan requires a one-on-one para for a student, when they can't fill that para or that parent is absent, we also contract with Western Nursing or True Staff to fill that position because we're out of compliance and we don't have a body there. So what happens is they budget for the position because it's required, but they also budget for the contract because they have to have it in place in order to use it on a dime, right? So now we're looking at how much money doesn't get spent by that duplicate budgeting. And so we're going to use that as a reduction. just the extra. So they're looking at it and we're waiting. We should get an answer from them any day now. But to this point, there's another $7 million in reductions. We're able to shift some expenses out of the general fund into other funds. Next slide. I'm sorry, go back one. So that, as of this morning, we were looking at a $17 million, almost $18 million gap in our forecasted budget. So the next slide. So on my way in this morning or this afternoon, I got a phone call saying that we received this year's tax increment financing because of the triennial update, and it ended up being a lot higher than we'd anticipated. So we revised next year's to increase by about $4 million. The TIF payments are the tax increment financing, and which are abated properties. We still get our share of it. And we did do an increase, estimated increase, but we just ended up getting more than we thought we would, which is a good thing. So that $4 million would offset and bring our gap to 13.6. And so that's where we stand today.
Thank you, Treasurer Wagner. Do any members have any questions or comments for the treasurer or interim superintendent? Mr. Craig, Finance Chair.
So thank you again for all the hard work you all are doing, as well as the Budget Task Force, because I think, again, this is a task that we have a very short time frame to get a lot of good work done. Just a couple of questions with regards to things that are on the update. So the board approved custodians reduction, can you just maybe explain it again to me of what exactly creates the savings?
If memory serves me correctly, there was 30 vacancies in custodians, and the previous superintendent recommended that those be reduced. And remember when you did the line by line voting, one of those was what you approved. After discussions last week with members on the Budget Task Force, they were concerned that it was too deep of a cut and that because the school buildings need to be cleaned, and that sharing custodians across the boards might be just a little bit too much. So we thought, well, if we give half of it back, and if we could find more to give more back, but at this point, that was the justification.
So would that be is that 0.8 an increase or is it just
Not a
less
decrease.
than the decrease that was expected, I guess?
It was right. It's a reduction it's a reduction because we had not put it in the budget software yet.
Gotcha.
And so we were going to add the full 30 and then reduce it to the half.
That makes total sense now.
Sorry if I confused you.
Thank
Um,
you, Mr. Craig. I was worried about that too.
The other thing, and I think this gets into a little bit of just structurally what we're seeing, the idea with Bramble was at some point for us to continue to keep expanding it as a preschool, at least for now. And I think that raises that question at long-term costs, because we don't get money from the state for preschool. Like are we also thinking about capacity of which the district can support with places such as a Bramble, where there is, basically very little funds from the states going into something like that?
Right, especially after last week's presentation, that included the whole early childhood package. So yes, but we feel comfortable at least moving into next school year with what the plan is for the number of classrooms. Had conversations with Director Brooks over early childhood, and she was at the table with us during these budget conversations as well.
And then my last question, again, we still are sitting at the 13.66. And so realistically, we only have a few meetings. I believe only one scheduled business meeting and one other potential meeting to be able to close down that 13.66. And so I think, realistically, is it reasonable to say that, again, that we should be preparing for the 90-day appropriation, because again, I think it's just an unreasonable amount of time to try and get down to that amount, recognizing the difficulty in getting to where we've already gotten.
Yes, I believe that we should be prepared to do a 90-day appropriation, as much as I hate them. It makes it really difficult to manage the finances, but these are some hard decisions that have to be taken, and there needs to be a lot of conversations about them, and it's not something to rush into.
I look forward to on budget finance and growth in August, September, for us to start the conversation for the next budget
Yes.
so that we can actually pass a budget on time next year. And, you know, again, give more clarity and stability to how this process works for all the people in the district. Because I think that's the one thing that we probably have not talked about enough, is that there are a lot of folks in this district who really depend upon the work that everyone is doing. And we want to make sure we're setting them up for success and being cognizant of how all of these challenges are affecting everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Any other members have any questions or comments? Dr. Moffett?
So thank you for this work. I see everyone on the budget task force. And I appreciate all of the work that's been done. My question is not to be disrespectful at all for the work. It's just an inquiry. A little concerned about, I don't know what slide it is, but on the May 29th budget update, Rob, if you could go to that, I think we're here. The 6.76, it was the one before. The $6.7 million transportation increase, what does that entail? I have multiple questions. That's the biggest one that I have. Why is there an increase? This feels trendy because we had something similar happen last year where we had to have a huge increase around the springtime in transportation costs. So I'm asking, with that in mind, what does that entail, that 6.7 million? Because that was an unexpected cost, right?
So to date, our understanding is there are three areas, three categories. One, an increase in the price of gasoline. Two, an increase of services that were provided out of the Department of Student Services for curb to curb. A child has to be picked up from their home and taken to school directly and vice versa. And then a cost related to bus monitors, typically for students with a few more challenges and generally unable to ride the bus by themselves.
There was actually a fourth one, where there was a 3% increase written into the contracts year to year.
So having said that, are we going to, is that something that we're going to look at, contracts for the budget, contract reviews for the budget, moving forward, or even to see some potential cost savings there? That just seems, I don't know if we agreed on that, but that seems a lot to me to have a 3% increase built into a contract along with gasoline prices. I get that, it's hitting me too, but I think that number strikes me at this particular time as being really, really high. And I'm sure you have a plan in place. So that was my first question, is to look at that 6.7. My other concern / question is that on the next slide, Rob, if you could advance it, Fund 14, to reduce copy click costs. That strikes me because we've also looked at reducing one-to-one devices. So I have concerns around further reductions that could potentially, is that at the school level? Where is that?
It's not reducing the number of clicks, it's reducing the price of the click. So we've spent the copy clicks out of the general fund.
Mhm.
And every time an employee makes a copy, we charge their budget 3 cents for every click on the copier. And that goes back to Fund 14 to help pay for the ProStar's contract. What we've been doing over the last couple of years is not, we've been replenishing 14 at a faster rate than we needed to. So we're just gonna reduce the cost of a copy click to save the general fund expense because we have a big cash balance in Fund 14.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think it does. I think.
Okay, and then can I just correct one misconception I think might be taken from my comment? The $6.7 million increase was not an increase over last year or this year. It was an increase from one day to the next on next year's budget. So everybody implemented their budgets. I did an extract to prepare for the board meeting. The very next day, that budget was up by $6.7 million. I don't know if they just missed a line or if it was new information or what, but we're not comparing one year to the next.
Okay,
Okay.
I think I got it. So I just also want to clarify again for the public more than myself, but We had the $32 million gap to close a week ago, and you all have gotten it down to 13.6 million. Is that right? So kudos, that's actually a good thing, considering we thought it was the 6 million from the beginning of the month. So thank you.
Other questions from members? I have just a quick transportation question. You mentioned, Treasurer Wagner, that this was just an additional thing that came up within a day, and that's a problem. And transportation is such a large part of our budget, but it didn't represent that much money from one year to the next. What is the cost of transportation over the last 3 years or so? I'm not trying to ask you to get that off the top of your mind or to get Mr. Burkhardt or somebody, but on a regular basis, has the transportation budget increased annually?
Yes,
Over how many years?
20.
Okay,
Uh,
in reality,
Um,
I know it's been,
I can't remember what I quoted to the ad hoc committee, but what year it was 22 million and it's now up to 50 million.
okay. Mr. Burkhardt?
So couple of questions here. I'll try to answer as many, and if I miss them, please ask again. So a couple of things happened. The 6.7 that Treasurer Wagner is alluding to is we had target numbers that we were trying to get to within our budgets. And within the transportation budget, they actually put that target number in the software. Once we got off of the target number, we actually put the actual budget in, which was the $6.7 million shortfall. Over the past 3, 4, 5 years, 2 decades, we've increased transportation significantly year after year. For example, adding 7th and 8th graders to yellow bus from Metro, House Bill 110, adding charters and non-publics, and that's ebbs and flows every single year based on whether our charter wants transportation or doesn't, and so it comes and goes. We're also looking at a situation where Treasurer Wagner and Superintendent Murphy said that we're going to have a 3% increase that was written into the contract before I started. So that's something that we can actually reopen if we want to. Fuel prices, obviously, we know that there's pain at the pump. That doesn't stop with buses either, and monitors and other things. We're looking at about $52 million next year. This past year, and I've said this a bunch of times in meetings, this past year was the first year that we had a stable transportation budget whereby we weren't changing our mode of service. So I know at one point I gave everyone a listing of what transportation costs. We were able to do that because this was the first year that we weren't adding schools or taking schools out or shifting kids from Metro to yellow bus. This was the first stable year. So now that we have a stable year, we can, one, start looking at the efficiencies of each one of those routes, which we're doing right now. We do know that we can combine some routes together. We also know that there were about 17 routes this year that we weren't getting kids to school on time. And that was because we changed all of our start times. And when we did that, it's a plan. And our plan for 95% of the district or the schools in the district and the buses that we routed, 95% of them were on time. That 5% we knew were an issue. So we were going to have to add in essentially 17 more buses into our fleet to make sure that we could get as close to that 100% as possible. So there's a lot of give and take here. I can go really deep in the weeds on each school if you want me to, but I'm not sure that you want that.
We'll probably hear enough of that later.
Did I answer at least close to all the questions?
I just have,
Yeah.
the vice mayor has been very interested in taking a leadership position on the metro piece and how everyone can help regarding the metro piece. And I know that Metro is going to be supposedly offering kind of more individualized routes, more unique routes by student.
Right.
And indeed, the issue of also when the student passes work and where they don't, and when they don't work and to where they work. And even each student getting at least their family understanding when, what the best route would be. And so I think we can anticipate some additional costs perhaps from Metro from that standpoint. And I know too, that this past year, we didn't have that many folks from Dawn schools, and next year they will be back. So is that being figured into the additional monies, or at least I think they're gonna be back using.
So we
our
haven't gotten
services.
official word that they will be back.
Okay.
So charters and non-publics had till April 1st to give us formal written documentation according to House Bill 110. And we do not have word from them that they officially need transportation. So this is probably a siren going off somewhere to
Yes.
for them to do that. Once they do that, we do have 14 days to provide a plan, not to provide transportation, but to provide a plan to them. Again, we haven't heard that they need transportation right now. To your Metro question, yes and yes. So yes, the costs are going up. If you remember last year, we engaged in a lengthy dialogue to try to get a 2-year Metro contract because our prices were going up year after year. We wanted stability, so we didn't want to have to go back every single year and try to renegotiate a contract. First of all. Second of all, we wanted to cap our expenses regardless of how many kids were riding. And so if you remember in previous years, we used to prepay for all of our Metro and then get this refund back. But the refund came back in the wrong fiscal year. So it added to the next year and it was just a mess. This new contract that we have gives us a flat landscape on having the cost in the year that they're actually incurred without prepaying and then getting a refund back. That was the first part. The second part is, I think there was, and I'd have to look back, I think there was a 3% escalation clause in that as well. Back, we looked at the CPI, before we signed the contract, we estimated that it would be about 3%. So that's what we went with. Obviously, we will start this year, probably starting in September, October, start putting together a contract for hopefully 2 coming years. With that also, Metro is working on, as you said, streamlining routes and making sure that we have as many routes that can get from, home to school as efficiently as possible, as safe as possible, without going through Government Square. So we're continuously having those conversations. We actually had a meeting with them about 2 weeks ago.
Great. Any other questions, comments from members? All right, well, that concludes the presentations under old business, and I think that means the floor is yours, Vice President.
Thank you, President Bolton. We are now at the time of our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will address all comments to the presiding officer. If you're online, once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. You should click on the camera icon to go interactive, provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you'd like a response to any of the questions you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we reserve the right to end that person's time. Again, each person will have 2 minutes to speak. When the timer goes off, your time is up, and please refrain from discussing any personnel items. After speaking, if you're online, you will briefly see the welcome screen again as you transition back to the live stream meeting. And finally, we ask that your public commentary be respectful of all of the listeners. Mr. Wilson, can you tell me how many speakers do we have online?
Madam Vice Chair, we have 2 speakers online today.
Okay, so we'll go with the first 2 online speakers. And I'm actually going to call my first 4 individuals down. If you could have a seat here in the seats right next to the podium. And excuse me if I do not say your name correctly, but I think it's Dana. I don't know the last name, so I'll say Dana D. And then I will say I'm assuming this is either Mari or Mary. Which one is it? Okay, thank you. Mary Brogan. Then next will be Nikita Davis, and then Sarah M. So if you could just come down, you can have a seat in the seats right here. And after the online speakers, we will start with you. All right, I'm ready, Rob.
Great. We have two online speakers today. The first one is going to be Abby Friend, followed by Nancy Sullivan. Abby, you can begin. Please unmute your camera and microphone.
Hello, my name is Abby Friend. I am the parent of an SCPA student and a member of the Cincinnati Education Justice Coalition. I would like to speak with you all tonight about the search for a new superintendent. First, I'd like to start by saying that I am feeling pretty good about the work that the interim superintendent has done as of now. So thank you for jumping right in and collaborating with folks in the district to get the work on the budget done. But I also would like to share some thoughts from the Education Justice Coalition about the search for a new superintendent. And so we got together and we talked about what we would like to see, what qualities we'd like to see in our new superintendent. And I'd just like to share those with you. So we'd like to see someone who practices meaningful community engagement, values transparency and educating the public, someone with a dedication to strengthening the relationship with unions, someone who centers students in decision-making and is politically proactive for all public schools, someone who views our district as part of an interconnected system and not as an island, and someone with a commitment to the community learning center model. We really hope that you take these qualities into consideration when looking for a new superintendent. I would also like to share some concerns about some things that I've heard about budget cuts in regards to a position for English language learners, and I just want to share that I think it's important that when you're looking at vacancies and positions that aren't filled, that you don't look at those as a whole and that you look at them piecemeal, so that we're not just like across the board cutting a bunch of positions without taking into consideration the way that affects our students. Thank you so much for giving me the time to speak.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next online speaker is going to be Nancy Sullivan. Nancy, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Nancy Sullivan, Director of Transformation CDC. I live in East Price Hill and work with primarily Central American immigrants. Many of them obviously are children or came here with children or have subsequently had children. So there are kids growing up in Spanish-speaking or dialect-speaking families. And some of them that I work with are now on a honor roll. So I really applaud the work of the district in making these gains possible, and want to say that this is obviously the fastest growing population in CPS when you add in the African students and some of the North African students or Syrians, and to be sure that that's a part of the budget that remains intact. And I don't want to see somebody at the top when the people in the actual schools doing the work are taken away or cut. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you so much. I think that concludes our online speakers. First speaker up will be Dana.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
I was going to project my teacher voice.
Yeah, you can raise the mic up a little bit if you need to. Yeah.
All right. Dear CPS board members, interim superintendent and interim assistant superintendent. The elimination of the ESOL manager position is a bad decision that will jumpstart a chain reaction of inequity for our CPS English learners and the staff who support them. Before making a decision, we encourage you to consider the role of the ESOL manager and how the elimination of this position would negatively impact CPS students, family, and staff. First, the ESOL manager is the sole position responsible for overseeing services for CPS's 5,604 multilingual language learners. which account for 16% of the district's overall population. Additionally, the ESOL manager oversees the work of the district's 119 ESOL teachers and assists building principals with the federal regulations. Comparing these current ratios of managers to students and managers to teachers, EL ratios are 1,100% and 440% greater, respectively, than those of student services managers. The impact of this disparity is that the English learners do not currently receive the same level of services provided by other CPS departments, and ESOL teachers do not receive the same level of administrative support as staff in other departments. This inequity will only increase if the ESOL manager is eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mary Brogan.
To move it down. In addition to what Dana said, and in addition to student and staff support, the ESOL manager participates annually in federal audits for Title III and OCR compliance. Meeting compliance standards is only possible because we have a knowledgeable manager. Regular audits of federal programs require a centralized management team to document and organize data that illustrates compliance. Past audits were successful because we have knowledgeable managers. The ESOL manager is the person who ensures that the district is adhering to and documenting evidence that schools are operating within the guidelines set by Title III and other federal funding sources. If this position is eliminated, CPS will risk falling out of compliance with Title III, as well as previously negotiated agreements with the Office of Civil Rights. Finally, the ESOL manager is responsible for monitoring fluctuations in ESOL enrollment and managing staff to support schools to the greatest extent possible. To this end, the ESOL team, under the guidance of the ESOL manager, has historically produced great outcomes for the district on the district report card. In fact, in 2022, when the district had 1.6 ESOL managers, the ESOL progress component was one of only 2 categories in which the district earned all gap closing points on the district report card. With the reduction of the EL manager position for the 22-23 and 23-24 school years, the percentage of English learners growing in their language skills took a turn to 44.4% and 45.4% respectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, Nikita Davis.
If the ESOL manager is eliminated, the data is currently trending toward only 33% of our English learners progressing in their language skills. And the district will not be successful in hitting our report card goals. 16% of the CPS population will be excluded from our vision of adequately preparing our students to be successful in their future endeavors. This outcome is not acceptable. As district leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that we have the necessary staff in place. Thus, for the good of our students, teachers, the community, and our district, we ask you to please reinstall the position of ESOL manager. As a side note, with less than 24 hours turnaround time, 85 staff members who support English language learners signed off in support of this letter. This is a testament to the level of concern that the announcement to eliminate this position has created. Again, for the good of our students, teachers, the community, and our district, we ask that you please reinstall the position of ESOL manager.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Sarah.
Here, real quick.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Madrigal, and I am an English language social worker. So I work with our newly arrived immigrant families and/or immigrant families living here in the district. And I'm here tonight to speak also on behalf of the English Language Learner Office and the very important impact it has on the work that I do for the district and its EL families every day. I feel very strongly that CPS isn't doing enough work to support its EL students. Instead of creating programs that actively include them, more often than not, EL students are an afterthought where services for them being tacked onto an already formed plan. A great example of this is the 3E program, where all students are asked to pick a pathway post-graduation: employment, enlistment, or enrollment. Schools are tasked with 100% compliance. It appears that no one has asked themselves what this means for our students who are actively engaged in their immigration process. They don't have access to legal work permits. They don't have the ability to enlist in the military, and they don't have the money to pay for college to enroll out of. This was not an initiative that's been designed to include those particular students. Additionally, when I come to these meetings and my voice is represented, I don't see a way for our English language families to be a part of the public that we claim everyone gets the opportunity. We don't invest in interpreters. We don't have the ability for our language learners to have a voice here today. So people are speaking on behalf of them, but I would much prefer that they speak on behalf of themselves. I think our EL language office does incredible work with very limited resources, services, and we make sure that their perspective is included as often as possible. I feel sometimes as a Latina in this district, I'm not represented in the policy making from the top down. You have to go pretty down the policy to find someone who is a Latino or Latina making decisions on behalf of Latino or Latina students. And so I'm asking all of you to recognize that this voice is the place, the EL office, where I feel most represented, where I feel like I've been given a voice and a platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before we begin with the next set of speakers, I am going to call on Board Member Morosky really quick to say a few words.
Appreciate it. And sorry about these. My other glasses aren't working, and these are so I can see you. But just for the edification of the press and the public who may not know, ESOL, ESOL, that everybody has been saying and talking about is English speakers of other languages. So just for the edification so that they know what you all are talking about, because no offense, I don't know that they do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we have a next group of speakers. You all can go ahead. And as I call the names, if you could please come and make your way down to the podium. I have Luke B. I have Lauren C., Bree Shaftel, and then Brad Smith. And Luke, I didn't want to mess up your last name. I'm so sorry. So I had Luke going first, then Lauren should be second, then Bree should be third, and then fourth should be Brad.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. My name is Luke Blocher. I am a parent of three students at Cairns, a former chair of the LSDMC at Cairns, and a member of, I think we call it the Cairns Advisory Group that was part of forming the school 7, 8, 9 years ago. I'm here today specifically to advocate, and some of our school community are here to advocate for the making of 3 appointments for assistant principals. I think were tabled at last week's meeting. If I'm reading the sort of reports or suggestions correctly, I think now there might also be an additional assistant principal reduction proposed. And I would just like to say a couple things around the value of something like an assistant principal in a school like Cairns, which we are proud of as a successful neighborhood school in the district, which is a result of strategy of this board and previous boards to invest in neighborhood schools as places that needed to grow for the district to grow. We're proud of what's happened there. And the biggest reason for that is the people in the building. And what our assistant principal promotion, but I think it will be true for many around the district, is about is enhancing the experience of the kids in the building because of the people in the building. You all are facing incredibly difficult choices today. Nobody doubts that. No reasonable person doubts that. And over the next few weeks as you try to resolve this budget crisis, I want to encourage you and ask you to think about, as you make those choices, about the people in the schools that are going to have the biggest impacts on the kids in those schools. And I think things like this, assistant principals in growing schools, are some of the things that are going to have the biggest impacts on continuing to grow the district and continue to enhance the experience of kids in district. So I encourage you to, as you make these tough choices, think about the kids, the people having the most direct impact in schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker.
Luke is very tall. My name is Lauren Coffrin. I am a PTO president at the Clifton Area Neighborhood School. I have a graduating preschooler and an incoming second grader at Cairns. This will be our third year with the school. I want to thank everyone today, the board and interim superintendent, for entertaining the letter which our PTO had provided. If you haven't already seen it, you've received an updated copy from me just a couple of hours ago with our more complex and comprehensive signature count. And as I was preparing to sort of talk today, thinking about what was important, I realized that really a lot of it was reflected in those 300 names that I typed this afternoon because my typing skills are better than my word processing skills. And I realized that of the 311 total signatures on that letter, there are 22 zip codes that are represented. There are a whole host of races, ethnicities, languages. There's one name in Arabic. It represents the 3 neighborhoods of Cairns. The names on that letter represent caregivers who are engaged and attending meetings and in touch with their teachers and principals, and a whole host of names that I recognize of people that I've never seen but know are at our school. The names on that letter are teachers, former teachers, administrators, caregivers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, founding members of Cairns, new families at Cairns, their renters, their owners, their taxpayers, and they're all folks that have been touched by Cairns, by the great work that this group has done, by CPS, and touched specifically by Eben Wilder. I'd like to go ahead and read one of the comments that were left on the signature, specifically about Mrs. Eben Wilder, who was our nominee for assistant principal at Cairns. This comment was left by a Cairns parent who, next time.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Bree.
Thank you, Vice President Weinberg. My name is Bree Shaftel. I'm the Vice President of the Parent-Teacher Organization at Clifton Area Neighborhood School. I just wanted to continue. Lauren was going to read a comment from one of our parents, and she stated, Mrs. Wilder was a welcoming member of the CAMS family in our transition to the community. Through her efforts with the Equity, Representation, and Inclusion Committee, I feel like our family is seen at CANS as a parent of a child with learning disabilities. Her efforts in helping me understand his learning goals and how the traditional classroom would aid in his development, as well as fostering his learning. My son has exhibited steady growth in testing scores and development throughout the school year. Mrs. Wilder's dedication to students and representation of cultural diversity, she proudly encourages, will be appreciated by all CANS families in her role as assistant principal. So I'd just like to say that, having an assistant principal is the next step for our growing neighborhood school, as Luke mentioned. Growing neighborhood schools is in many ways the future of CPS. It creates an engaged, parent cohort. It really gets the taxpayers, people who don't necessarily have school-age children who surround that school community involved. And we really, on behalf of CANS and the other 2 schools who were up for, a possible AP position this year, it would be pivotal for us. It would be pivotal for our growth. It would be wonderful for our staff, for their morale, for their continued, efforts to show up for our students, engage, and make a difference for them every day. We know you have tough decisions. There are so many things on the table. We appreciate you. We appreciate everything you do. We see you, and we hope that you see us and the efforts that we are making to grow this district together. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Our last speaker.
Good evening, Board of Education. My name is Brad Smith. Excuse me, I'm a resident, I'm a taxpayer, and a voter. In the last election, a former board president accepted $11,000 campaign contribution from Leaders in Education PAC, as reported by Open Secrets. That candidate's own campaign report only reported that same contribution was $9,000. Leaders in Education PAC is located at 25 Broadway, New York City, 1 floor away from the Teach for America offices in the same building. This PAC is associated with the Teach for America created Leadership and Educational Equity, which makes membership free to all Teach for America members. This former board president has never recused themselves of any vote regarding Teach for America. The board most recently entered into a contract with Teach for America on July 22nd, 2024. Further, this former board president is married to the head of Accelerate Great Schools. CPS is in need of another West Side school to relieve
Excuse me,
overcrowding.
Mr. Smith, if you could just keep that to a general statement, please.
Okay. The board discussed purchasing the former Cincinnati Christian University property. Somehow Accelerate Great Schools, in partnership with IDEA Charter Schools, was able to acquire that property. This former board member, or whether this board member, has never accused themselves from any contract between Accelerate Great Schools and Cincinnati Public Schools. For someone saying they are trying to build transparency and trust, their actions and proposed policy introduced at the last meeting are doing the exact opposite. Instead, I see an attempt to limit the speech of local citizens and local organizations in favor of more out-of-state voices who do not know our students nor our district. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes the hearing of the public, and I will pass it along to you, President Bolton.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's participation. We have really only one more, if I recall, short presentation, and I think we're in need of general counsel to help provide that, but general counsel and a board member left the room.
So, President Bolton,
Yes.
since we're in an influx, can I make a statement or just say something? Or does it need to be, I just wanted to respond to our hearing of the.
No, they
public.
come
Oh,
back.
okay, never mind.
Yes, we just have a very brief presentation and explanation since it's been on the media and it's also been discussed pretty widely within the district. We asked the interim superintendent and the treasurer and also General Counsel Hoyne to, if they would, give us just once again, the broad guidelines of what it means regarding non-renewals and the rules guarding that, and then probably the rules as well, talking in terms of RIF or talking in terms of other items that might be pertinent to staff reductions, if indeed we have additional staff reductions down the road for the budget. So if Mr. Hoyne, if you would just talk to us again about not the specifics, but about the generalities and the rules regarding non-renewals.
Sure. So recommendations for non-renewal need to be made and accepted by the board by June 1. Therefore, there's a time crunch. That requires that there be 2 evaluations of an administrator as well as a recommendation from the superintendent for renewal or non-renewal. That has to be done by June 1. RIFs, reductions in force, they don't have the same kind of timing requirements. There is a notice, an administrator who's to be RIFed has a right to notice. I think it's 15 days. They have a right to 30 days paid status after the board takes action on their non-renewal. Can happen at any time. That's really a position-based decision, so that if that position would return to the district, that administrator, even though separated from employment, would have a right to recall or a right to return to that position. I think those are the 2 things you asked me about. Any other questions?
Other comments by treasurer or by interim superintendent regarding any description regarding non-renewals? Could you explain riffing one more time for us?
Again, riffing has to be for a specific reason. It has to be for either the financial condition of the district, reorganization, an administrator coming back from leave. There are specific reasons that are laid out. Again, the administrator gets notice ahead of the board taking action, and then a certain period of paid time after the board takes action. And then they have the right to recall into that position if the board should reinstate that position for up to 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyne. Does anybody, any board members have any questions regarding any of those explanations? Great. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Hoyne. Appreciate it. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the interim superintendent?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions for the superintendent? Mr. Morosky?
Thank you, President Bolton. Just one. So, while I may understand the non-renewal process and all these different various processes and acronyms that are the reason most people don't like and or trust government, because we tend to make things more complicated perhaps than it needs to be, but oftentimes for good reason, to make sure things are getting done the way they should be done. The question I have, and there are a lot of speakers, and I think some folks know, I'm no expert really at much, but I do like to try to help folks and in working in the community in some way with immigrants or refugees. I'm well versed in the numerous systems that are intentionally designed to make life hard on these people. Obviously not wanting to be part of one of those systems, I am wont to vote in favor of the superintendent's recommendations because you are closer to the work than me. But one thing I think might be helpful for me, maybe for other people, but maybe not if you're smarter than me, which you probably are, but for me, is if the recommendations are approved, it doesn't necessarily mean that there wouldn't be any of these services, A, and B, I'm asking if that's true. If the services would exist, but then B, my other question, which I think is bigger, is if there is an opportunity for, as we're looking at 5,600, and there's going to be more than that next school year, and more than that school year after that, and more after that, particularly since, again, not to belabor the point, but it's worth belaboring, the systems in this country are crushing down on groups of people, particularly Mauritanians from West Africa that aren't going to have a home soon, and they're about 3 feet away from Cincinnati, our school district. Venezuelans living in garages. All of these people can say more of that. Nancy Sullivan certainly can. But is there then an opportunity once we close this existentially terrifying budget gap, as we build for the future, to look at maybe even beefing up, like having a central point? So A, the services would not go anywhere if the recommendations are approved. Am I right or wrong? And then B, is there an opportunity to reimagine like where we're at?
Appreciate. Definitely appreciate the question. Without a doubt, there have been people around the table this past week spending a lot of time on how to address this budget, including looking at every single personnel, every single non-personnel item that we have to deal with. These are never easy conversations or easy decisions. We do, however, resolve that the services will continue. It may look different than what it looks today, but we are all committed to continuing the services. It could be that the work is done in a multitude of departments. I have spoken to different department directors who are excited, anxious, and willing to step up, accept the work, take the work and the responsibilities on, including myself. I have worked in community engagement for the last several years, being a huge advocate, even though it may not feel like it in this moment, of making sure the whole child is addressed in our school district. I am an advocate for that. And if there are opportunities from this board to reimagine what that looks like for our children and their families, I'll be the first one to step up, raise my hand, roll up my sleeves, not just give direction, but to do the work.
I appreciate that, interim superintendent, and it makes sense to me. And again, I think we're lucky to have so many community partners that are willing, to help, and already do, and for a multitude of student demographics, not just this one specific. So thanks.
Other members have comments or questions? Dr. Moffett, and then we'll go to the Vice President.
So Board Member Morosky and I usually align on a lot of things. The only thing I align with exactly what he shared. I just want to acknowledge that it was not missed on me that 85 staff signed off. It was not missed on me that your voices do matter. And CPS, I don't know the person who said it, but she said CPS needs to do more, invest in interpreters so that our Latina students and our other students are seen and heard. I do want to assure you that our interim superintendent has heard that. And we're listening. We do see you, and the work won't stop for those students, and the support will continue for the staff. I also know this is tough, but we are faced with it was $32 million gap. And so things may have to look different, but your voices are absolutely heard and at the table while you're not there. And so just know that we're trusting our interim superintendent to maintain and build upon what needs to be next. So just wanted to acknowledge that we see you. Thank you for all you do.
Mr. Craig.
So I wanted to really talk on two things, and I think one is a easy one for the interim superintendent to kind of respond to, which is, so the first thing is that while I recognize that their ESL manager is one of the positions that are listed, there are also a number of the assistant principals, and I think one of the conversations from last week was around, again, rethinking the assistant principals of culture and community, and also the elementary school assistant principals ratio to make sure that it's aligned with what the district can support. But I want to also confirm, or I guess reiterate to folks who are in those positions, that if they have opportunities to still teach or to be a part of the district in some other form or fashion, that stuff we will still work as hard as possible to encourage them to stay within our district, right?
There are 250 teaching vacancies at this time. If you are interested, we would love to have you. I believe that many of the APs in question are internal, and so there is a place for you. At the same time, there may still be assistant principal vacancies.
Yes.
But doing things in order based on what we know today is where we are today.
And I think that's an important part to stress. And again, I hate to be, well, I don't hate to be, I appreciate being the wet blanket right here. This is going to be hard. At no point should we ever tell you this is going to be an easy thing to do. We've got a budget hole. We've got to feel that there are not many good options left on the table to put up. All of the options are going to cause pain to somebody. I appreciate it. I recognize it. I don't think we say it enough, because the fact of the matter is that our students have done a tremendous job in spite of the hard work and hard efforts that are put before them. And that's going to continue to do a great job because we have some great students in our district. And we have to acknowledge that the things that we're going to make decisions on are hard. And I think that's not to say we shouldn't make them, but it's just that we have to acknowledge that it's not going to be something everybody loves, or sometimes nobody will love it. I think the other point that I want to really reiterate with this, and I think this is about the future, so not really in this budget or this meeting or whatever, but I really would like to see us talk more about professional development, succession plan, growth opportunities for folks within our district. Because I do think the long-term success of our district is built on how do we produce not just good educators, but the folks who will lead in the future, the folks who will be able to move up the channels in the future. Because the strength of that pipeline has always been one of the tools we've used to allow folks to grow, to become at higher levels, to do this all throughout. And I think one of the struggles that happens when we do a budget conversation is we lose track of that pipeline conversation, right? We are recognizing and appreciating the things that are needed, but I really would love to see us, once we get past this, once we get through our conversations in September and October at Budget and Finance, to really also start a process of thinking about what are those pipelines to allow folks to develop into their next position. And again, there are a lot of open positions right now, and there are a lot of things that we are working to fill continuously, but that doesn't mean we don't look at where are the opportunities for those other folks who would like to grow and like to move up and like to continue to be stars, because I think that is, again, in all of the shadows and all the grays that comes with the budget process, that is the hope that springs at the end, is that we are able to create opportunities still for folks to be developed into the next leaders in our district.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Other members have comments, questions regarding
Thank you,
Superintendent's
President.
recommendations?
So it's not necessarily pertaining to the recommendation, but it is about the last meeting in regards to the assistant principal pipeline position. Is that something that has still been tabled, or have we made a determination on that?
The board has not removed it from the table. The superintendent can't remove it, but the board has not determined yet to remove it from the table. It might be a consideration in June 3rd or some other time, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're almost prepared for a vote regarding the superintendent's recommendations. I do want to add kind of a personal issue for me regarding the ESOL piece. My alma mater that everyone knows that I love dearly is well populated by many, many young people that English is not their first language. If indeed part of the greatness of Aiken right now is that population and what it values for all of everyone in the community and certainly for the school. So I have great pride in it. I also want to say that as I am prepared to vote for these, vote for the superintendent's recommendations, I have to say that this is something that perhaps the community's not yet been privy to, but I've been inspired by a broader, larger, more expansive view of what these services might mean now and in the future. And I think that that's very much a part of this recommendation that's been made. So I think if there's no other comments or questions or discussions, I think Treasurer Wagner, we are ready for a vote regarding the superintendent's recommendations.
Mr. Craig,
Yes.
Mr. Lindy,
Yes.
Ms. Mapp,
Yes, with the exception of page 15, letter G. And I would like to abstain from page 3, teacher class 6, line item 9.
could you repeat
Treasurer,
that
did
last
you,
part?
yeah, would you repeat that for us?
Page
So
3.
yes, I would like to support the recommendation with the exception of page 15, letter G for notice of non-reemployment. And I would also like to abstain from page 3 for the teacher class 6 recommendation for line item number 9.
Thank you, Ms. Mapp.
Dr. Moffat,
Yes.
Mr. Morosky,
Yes.
Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
President Bolton.
Yes. Thank you all. Before we move to adjournment, it would be great for anybody, I didn't think it made it on the agenda, and that's my fault. Does anybody have any assignments for the superintendent or treasurer? I know that Dr. Moffat had talked about before, and maybe it was me that mentioned it about, and it has come up, helping us understand how you are organizing your group, your leadership team, your cadre of folks that have been making that we've been hearing about the budget task force, and we've had the union leadership also around the table, and there are a number of people that are not going to be in the district. So I'll make the assignment. You want to make the assignment officially?
Yes, I apologize. I was trying to find it on my agenda.
Sorry.
So I do think it's prudent to offer or to give the Superintendent Murphy an assignment, outline an organizational chart for the district so that the public is aware, the departments are aware of where things are being restructured, who is now reporting to whom, what departments are being eliminated, and so that we can begin to be a little bit more efficient with the staff over the summer, but starting now. So that's my assignment, is to work on an organizational chart for the board and the public to be able to see.
Thank you. You said it much better than I did. Mr. Craig, assignment.
Yeah, so I have two, one for the superintendent. I think just again, because of the outreach and the outpour of support for our ESL students and the work that's needed for them, you know, us really revisioning, rethinking whatever the language we want to use for it, but also recognizing the need for the future potential of someone being dedicated in that role to coordinate services still that are already still being provided, that are still going to be happening. So I think at least just bringing forth a plan to address the need to coordinate those services still and repurpose those work through. I think this falls in line with Dr. Moffitt's request for a organizational structure. It'd be helpful for people to have that information. The second is, I think, again, I bring this to the discussion for the board more so than for anyone else, is that as we are thinking about the conversations with the city and others, that we begin to have the conversations about population clusters. I think this is actually something that is the biggest problem, the biggest issue that will affect our district going forward that we don't talk enough about. Looking at recent numbers, even within like Project Connect and some of the other resources, the clustering of not just our students, but students of greater need and poverty is something that Board Member Lindy brought up as well in our board budget, finance and growth meeting that we're going to add to our agenda. But I think it's something the board should be having the larger conversation with. I think this is especially true with our ESL students as well, because we know that there's a overabundance of students being moved into areas where they are saturating the schools. And I think this is an issue that we will start to see the services needed in schools become very much concentrated in parts of our city. So I think it's something for the board to address in some future meetings, especially our meetings with the city that I believe Dr. Moffitt is trying to get coordinated and scheduled for us.
An excellent suggestion. Do I have any other assignments? Dr. Moffitt, once we get started.
I know, I just get on a roll, I'm sorry. I wanted to, the board, we have these joint city CPS meetings, and June 10th is the proposed date of the next. So I'd like to give an assignment to the superintendent to check the availability of the ILT or this space, ILC, I'm sorry, this space. And then anything else that's needed, coordinate that with Ms. Davis in our office so that we can get back to the city. We're not sure if it's going to be here or at City Hall, but we wanted to see the availability here. And then ask the board members to also check to see if June the 10th is good for them. There's nothing going on that we know of here, but just to make certain that there's no conflicts.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. And to that point, is there an emerging agenda for that meeting, or do you need still contributions?
Contributions are welcome. The city definitely has their own ideas, but we can ask them questions. So if you do find that there are some concerns that you all would like, send them to Ms. Davis and we'll get them on the topic. But I think an appropriate conversation is about our ESL students in the city and how we can get services for them as well that are needed or going to be needed. So if you all also have any things that maybe we can work with the city on, please send those as well. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you all for this meeting, and thanks the community for participating, and also board members, thank you for the discussion and executive session. I think it was very useful. Mr. Lindy.
Not an assignment, but before we
okay.
break, I had one piece. I don't want to interrupt though.
Okay, we won't adjourn till you finish what you need to do.
Very quick and quicker than the last couple meetings, I promise.
Okay.
There were a few comments made during the hearing of the public that were inaccurate. And I know we're going to have a longer discussion about the proposed conflicts policy at our next meeting. I wanted to say in 15 seconds that
personal privilege, well warranted.
Making sure that I'm fully compliant with our ethics requirements is a big deal to me. I have had any number of conversations with our general counsel about how to make sure that I've done that. And I'm grateful for his support. I believe I've done that completely. So much so that I even resigned from my job at Teach for America before taking this position. So I welcome the longer discussion. I think this is a good and important discussion. And I wanted to set the record straight on that account. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindy. With that note, we will welcome a motion to adjourn, and I look to Mr. Morosky to make that motion. And I look to someone
Second.
somewhere to,
Second.
there we have it.